The school hallway buzzed with life as students filled the space, their laughter and chatter echoing against the lockers. Backpacks swung carelessly, sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, and the energy of the morning was palpable. Amid the chaos, Marcus stepped in quietly, his gaze fixed on the ground. He hugged his books tightly to his chest, his movements cautious, as though trying to blend into the background. His shoes, old and tattered with visible holes, caught the eye of a nearby group of kids. Their conversation paused as they glanced at him, whispers quickly turning into stifled giggles. Marcus hesitated mid-step, noticing their attention. He adjusted his stride, trying to quicken his pace, but the sound of laughter seemed to grow louder, wrapping around him like an oppressive cloud. The camera lingered on his shoes as he walked past a group of girls near the lockers. One of them pointed, covering her mouth as she whispered to her friend. Marcus clenched his jaw, his shoulders hunching as though he could somehow disappear. The hallway grew quieter as Marcus walked further in, but the sound of footsteps behind him made his heart race. A group of popular kids led by Ethan sauntered toward him. Their confident strides and loud laughter echoed through the corridor, drawing attention as they passed. Ethan's sharp eyes fell on Marcus's worn-out shoes, and a grin spread across his face. "Hey, Marcus!" Ethan called out, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Marcus stopped mid-step, his shoulders tightening. Ethan pointed at Marcus's shoes, the grin on his face widening as the group burst into laughter. "Did you find those shoes in the dumpster?" Ethan asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Marcus's gaze dropped to the floor. His voice was barely above a whisper as he replied, "No, I didn't." Another kid in the group chimed in, barely able to contain his laughter. "Looks like they're older than the school itself." The group roared with laughter, their voices bouncing off the lockers. Marcus stood frozen, his cheeks burning with humiliation. He clenched his notebook tighter against his chest, his eyes fixed on his scuffed shoes. The hole near the sole seemed to glare back at him, a painful reminder of how out of place he felt. As the laughter faded behind him, Marcus quietly made his way to his classroom, slipping into his seat at the back corner. He tried to focus on his notebook, his pencil scratching softly against the paper, but the tension in the room was palpable. The popular kids were scattered across the classroom, Ethan sitting near the center with his usual smirk. The teacher began the lesson, her voice steady as she wrote equations on the board. But Ethan leaned over to the kid beside him, his voice a loud whisper that wasn't subtle at all. "Bet those shoes can't even survive another week," Ethan joked, nudging his friend. The other kid snickered, glancing back at Marcus before whispering back, "Maybe we should start a donation drive for him." Marcus kept his eyes glued to his notebook, pretending not to hear. His pencil moved quickly, scribbling notes he wasn't even reading. The snickers grew louder as Ethan leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting. "Hey, Marcus," Ethan called out, his voice cutting through the teacher's lecture. "Are those limited edition? They look like they came from the prehistoric era?" The classroom erupted into quiet laughter. The teacher glanced back briefly, but Ethan's innocent expression made her turn back to the board without a word. Marcus tightened his grip on his pencil, his knuckles turning white. His face burned with embarrassment, but he didn't look up. He refused to let them see how much it hurt. The whispers continued throughout the lesson, each one a dagger that cut deeper into Marcus's already fragile confidence. But he didn't say a word. He kept his head down, his focus on his notebook, determined to make it through the day without breaking. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Marcus was one of the first to leave. He moved quickly, avoiding eye contact as he headed to his next class. But the sound of Ethan's voice followed him, the teasing words echoing in his mind like a cruel soundtrack he couldn't escape. The laughter, the whispers, the mocking stares, it all weighed heavily on Marcus, but he kept moving forward, each step heavier than the last. All he wanted was to disappear, to blend into the background, to be invisible. But in this school, it seemed like even that was too much to ask. The morning announcements crackled over the school's PA system as students shuffled to their seats, their voices quieting. The principal's voice, steady and upbeat, filled the classroom. "Good morning, students. I'm excited to announce that next week we'll be hosting our annual talent show. This is your chance to showcase your unique skills and passions. Whether it's singing, dancing, or something entirely different, we encourage everyone to participate. Sign-ups are open starting today." The announcement sparked a wave of chatter among the students, some discussing ideas, others brushing it off entirely. At the back of the room, Marcus sat silently, his gaze distant. But as the principal spoke, his eyes flickered with an idea. For the first time in a while, a small spark of excitement lit up inside him. But just as quickly, doubt crept in. He slouched in his seat, shaking his head slightly. Liam, Marcus's only friend, noticed the brief glimmer in Marcus's eyes. Seated beside him, Liam leaned over and whispered, "You should enter, Marcus. Show them what you can do." Marcus glanced at him, his brow furrowed in uncertainty. "What if they laugh at me again?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with hesitation. Liam smiled encouragingly, nudging him lightly on the arm. "Let them laugh," he said firmly. "You'll show them they're wrong. You're better than they think, Marcus." Marcus studied Liam's face, searching for reassurance. There was no judgment, no pity, only genuine belief in his potential. Marcus nodded faintly, but the fear in his heart hadn't yet subsided. Still, Liam's words planted a seed of courage that Marcus couldn't ignore. That evening, Marcus sat on the floor of his small room, staring at his worn-out shoes. The holes in the fabric, the faded color, the peeling soles, each flaw was a reminder of the teasing and humiliation he had endured. But as he stared, another thought took hold. What if these shoes could be more than just a source of embarrassment? What if they could be transformed into something that made people see him differently? Taking a deep breath, Marcus rummaged through an old box under his bed. Inside were scraps of fabric, bottles of paint, brushes, and bits of old materials he had collected over the years. They weren't much, but they were enough. He spread them out in front of him, the spark of creativity beginning to ignite. Marcus picked up his shoes and studied them closely, imagining the possibilities. Slowly, he began to work. He cut pieces of fabric and carefully stitched them over the holes. He mixed paints, experimenting with colors until they were just right. His fingers worked with precision, his movements steady despite his nerves. The hours ticked by, but Marcus barely noticed. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose. By the end of the first night, the shoes already looked different. The scraps of fabric had added texture, the paint brought vibrancy, and the designs he sketched out gave them personality. They weren't finished yet, but they were no longer a symbol of shame. Marcus felt a small surge of pride as he held them up, his lips curving into the faintest smile. Over the next several days, Marcus dedicated every free moment to perfecting his creation. Each detail mattered. The lines had to be clean, the colors bold but harmonious, the materials seamlessly integrated. He pushed himself to try new techniques, learning as he went. Though the work was tedious, he felt a growing excitement with each step of the process. Liam, ever supportive, would check in on him, offering encouragement and marveling at the transformation. "These are amazing, Marcus," Liam said one afternoon, his voice full of admiration. "No one's going to believe what you've done with these." Marcus smiled shyly, his confidence slowly building. "Thanks, Liam. I just hope they see the effort, and not just me." Liam shook his head, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "Trust me, they'll see more than that. You're going to blow them away." As the talent show approached, Marcus worked tirelessly to complete his masterpiece. Each night, he'd sit in his room, carefully perfecting every inch of the shoes. They were no longer just a pair of old, worn-out sneakers. They had become a canvas for his talent, a reflection of his determination and creativity. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he had something worth showing to the world. And though doubt still lingered, the shoes in his hands reminded him that he had the power to change how people saw him and how he saw himself. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as students filled the seats, eager to see what the talent show would bring. Backstage, Marcus stood quietly, his heart pounding. He glanced down at his shoes, now transformed into a vibrant, custom creation, and took a deep breath. Today was the day he'd show everyone what he was capable of. Liam stood by his side, giving him an encouraging nod. "You've got this, Marcus," Liam said confidently. Marcus nodded, clutching the plain white sneakers he had prepared for his demonstration. As his name was called, he stepped onto the stage, the spotlight suddenly making the large auditorium feel even more intimidating. The audience erupted into laughter almost immediately. Ethan and his friends were in the front row, pointing and snickering. "Look at him!" Ethan whispered loudly, nudging his friend. "What's he gonna do? Fix his shoes on stage?" Marcus hesitated for a brief moment, the sound of the laughter threatening to shake his confidence. But then he glanced at Liam in the wings, who gave him a thumbs up. Straightening his shoulders, Marcus walked to the table set up at center stage and placed the plain white sneakers on it. The crowd quieted slightly, curious about what he was doing. "Today," Marcus began, his voice steady but quiet, "I want to show you something I've been working on." He picked up a paintbrush and dipped it into a palette of vibrant colors. The first stroke on the sneaker was slow and deliberate, the soft sound of the brush on fabric audible in the silent room. As Marcus worked, the audience began to quiet down, their initial laughter fading into murmurs of interest. The camera zoomed in on Marcus's hands as he moved with speed and precision, painting intricate designs onto the sneakers. Swirls of color formed a stunning gradient, and patterns emerged that looked almost professional. He added pieces of fabric, seamlessly stitching them into the design, while balancing each element with careful thought. His movements were confident, each step executed with skill and creativity. The laughter had completely stopped now. The audience watched in silence, mesmerized by what was unfolding on stage. Ethan and his friends leaned forward, their earlier mockery replaced by surprise. The students who had once judged Marcus were now captivated, unable to look away as he transformed the plain sneakers into a work of art. Marcus worked quickly, the energy in the room shifting with each new detail he added. He used stencils to create intricate shapes, layered colors for depth, and added metallic accents that shimmered under the stage lights. The final product was a stunning pair of custom sneakers that looked like they belonged in a high-end boutique. As Marcus finished, he held up the completed sneakers for everyone to see. The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of astonishment and admiration sweeping through the room. Marcus glanced out at the sea of faces, his heart racing as he realized they weren't laughing anymore. They were cheering. Ethan, who had been sitting slack-jawed in the front row, muttered to his friend, "I can't believe he just did that." "Neither can I," his friend replied, equally stunned. Marcus stood tall, his confidence growing as the applause continued. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. He wasn't shrinking into the background. He was standing in the spotlight, his talent and hard work on full display. And the very people who had mocked him were now clapping for him, their laughter replaced by genuine admiration. The principal stepped onto the stage, a broad smile on her face as she approached Marcus. "Marcus, that was incredible," she said into the microphone. "You've shown us all the power of creativity and perseverance. Thank you for sharing your talent with us." The crowd erupted into another round of applause, and Marcus felt a wave of pride wash over him. He glanced at Liam, who was clapping wildly from the wings, and gave him a small, grateful smile. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt seen, not for his old shoes or his quiet demeanor, but for his talent and determination. As he walked off the stage, sneakers in hand, he knew this was just the beginning. The auditorium was silent, save for the faint sound of Marcus setting down his tools and holding up the finished sneakers under the spotlight. The once plain white shoes had been transformed into a dazzling masterpiece. Vibrant colors swirled together in a gradient, intricate patterns stretched across the sides, and metallic accents caught the light, making the sneakers shimmer like something out of a high-end designer showcase. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by a collective murmur of amazement. Students leaned forward in their seats, straining for a closer look. Teachers exchanged astonished glances, and even the principal, seated in the front row, appeared momentarily speechless. In just a few minutes, Marcus turned an ordinary pair of shoes into something extraordinary, a masterpiece that no one could ignore. Ethan, who had spent the entire show mocking Marcus, sat frozen in his seat. His usual smirk was replaced with wide eyes and a dropped jaw. He nudged one of his friends, gesturing toward the sneakers as if needing confirmation that what he was seeing was real. How did he do that? Ethan muttered, his voice laced with disbelief. His friends, equally stunned, could only shake their heads. Gone was their mocking tone. In its place was genuine shock and awe. The boy they had laughed at, teased, and dismissed had just shown them a talent they couldn't deny. Marcus stood under the spotlight, holding the sneakers high for everyone to see. For the first time, he felt the eyes of the crowd on him not with judgment, but with admiration. The energy in the room shifted as the silence gave way to an uproarious applause. One by one, students began to stand, clapping louder and louder until the entire auditorium was on its feet. The sound of clapping echoed off the walls, filling every corner of the space. Teachers stood with proud smiles, clapping along with the students. The principal rose from her seat, her hands coming together in a powerful, deliberate applause. Marcus scanned the crowd, his heart pounding as he took it all in. The same people who had laughed at him, who had judged him for his worn-out shoes, were now cheering for him with all their might. "Bravo, Marcus!" someone shouted from the audience, and the applause grew even louder. From the wings, Liam beamed, clapping so hard his hands turned red. He gave Marcus a double thumbs up, his smile so wide it threatened to split his face. "I told you!" Liam called out, though his voice was drowned in the roar of the crowd. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, but this time, it wasn't from humiliation. It was from pride, from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that he had proved them all wrong. He had taken the thing they mocked him for and turned it into something beautiful, something unforgettable. The principal made her way onto the stage, her smile radiant as she approached Marcus with a microphone in hand. She gestured for the crowd to quiet down, though the applause lingered for a moment before fading into an expectant silence. "Marcus," she began, her voice warm and filled with pride, "what you've done here today is nothing short of incredible. You've shown all of us the power of creativity, perseverance, and self-expression. Thank you for reminding us that everyone has something special to offer." The crowd erupted into applause again, and the principal turned to the audience, gesturing toward Marcus. "Let's give him one more round of applause for sharing his incredible talent with us today." The auditorium thundered with cheers and claps, the sound reverberating through the space. Marcus lowered the sneakers slightly, his hands trembling as he waved shyly to the crowd. His face, once marked by hesitation and self-doubt, now glowed with quiet confidence. Ethan and his friends sat back in their seats, looking completely deflated. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, muttering under his breath, "I didn't think he had it in him." "Guess we were wrong," one of his friends replied, his voice filled with reluctant respect. Marcus stepped forward, standing tall under the spotlight. As the applause slowly began to fade, he looked out at the sea of faces, his heart full. For once, he wasn't invisible. For once, he wasn't the target of ridicule. He was seen, truly seen, for who he was and what he could do. As Marcus left the stage, sneakers in hand, the crowd continued to cheer. Liam met him backstage, pulling him into a quick hug. "I knew you'd do it," Liam said, grinning. "You showed them who you really are." Marcus smiled, his confidence blooming like never before. The boy who had once walked through the hallways with his head down was now the talk of the school, for all the right reasons. The talent show had ended, but the buzz around Marcus hadn't. As students spilled into the hallway, a crowd began to gather around him. Faces that once wore smirks now lit up with curiosity and admiration. They pointed at the sneakers in his hands, their voices filled with excitement. "How did you do that, Marcus?" one student asked, wide-eyed. "Can you teach me how to customize shoes like that?" Another chimed in. Marcus, though still a little overwhelmed, smiled as he answered their questions. For the first time, he wasn't invisible or ignored. He was the center of attention, and it felt good. He explained his process, how he used scraps, paint, and creativity to transform something old into something extraordinary. The more he spoke, the more confident he became. Through the crowd, Ethan hesitated at the edge, his usual bravado replaced with a sheepish expression. After a moment, he stepped forward, his hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. The chatter around them died down as students noticed Ethan approaching Marcus. "Hey, Marcus," Ethan began, his voice quieter than usual. He scratched the back of his head, avoiding Marcus's eyes. "I didn't know you could do that. Your shoes are amazing." Marcus looked at him for a moment, studying the sincerity in his face. Then he smiled, his tone light but firm. "Thanks," Marcus said. "Maybe next time, don't judge people by what they wear." Ethan nodded, his cheeks flushing slightly as he looked down at the ground. "Yeah," he muttered. "You're right. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Marcus nodded, accepting the apology without holding on to the bitterness. The crowd watched in quiet awe, the moment marking a clear shift in how they viewed both boys. It wasn't just Marcus who had changed. Ethan, too, seemed different, humbled by the lesson he'd learned. Marcus taught his classmates a lesson they'd never forget, that true value isn't in what you wear, but in what you can create. And sometimes the people you underestimate the most are the ones who surprise you the greatest. The next day, Marcus walked through the school hallway, his custom-designed shoes catching the light as he moved. Unlike before, his steps were confident, his head held high. Students turned to look at him, not with mockery, but with respect. Some stopped to compliment his shoes, while others simply nodded in admiration. As he passed a group of students, one of them whispered to their friend, "That's the guy from the talent show. He's amazing." Marcus smiled to himself, the sound of their words filling him with a quiet pride. He spotted Liam waiting by his locker and walked over, the two of them exchanging grins. "So," Liam said, nudging him playfully, "how does it feel to be the school's new favorite artist?" "Pretty good," Marcus replied with a laugh. "But I couldn't have done it without you, Liam. Thanks for believing in me." "Always," Liam said, giving him a fist bump. The camera lingered on Marcus as he walked away, his sneakers a symbol of his talent and determination. The once quiet boy who had been mocked for his appearance was now admired for his creativity and strength. His journey wasn't just about proving others wrong, it was about discovering his own worth. Marcus walked down the hallway, surrounded by admiring glances and respectful nods. The sunlight streaming through the windows reflected off his vibrant sneakers, a perfect representation of how far he had come. The screen faded to black, leaving the audience with a powerful reminder that true worth isn't about what you have, it's about what you make of it.